Cool. Well, during this summer, we worked on looking at whether or not wildfire patterns around the globe were affected by the asteroid impact that hit at the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. For more context, 66 million years ago, the Chicxulub asteroid impact hit the Yucatan Peninsula, which is right around here, with the force of 100 times the total nuclear arsenal globally if it all went off at once. And our site that we chose to assess sediments from this time is El Kef, Tunisia, which is here, quite far from the actual impact. And this site is the global boundary stratotype section for the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. And we were looking at polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in particular, which are biomarkers of wildfire because they are formed during incomplete combustion and are retained very well in sediments due to how recalcitrant the compounds are. In the lower right corner, you can see a picture of one of the cores that we were looking at. And the boundary is right here in the middle between sediments deposited in the Paleogene and sediments deposited in the Cretaceous. And some of these compounds that we were looking at are have their structures shown here with the aromatic benzene rings with the 6 carbons. These 3 in particular are on the larger side and are formed during hotter fires, since hotter fires produce larger pHs with more rings. To analyze our sediments for these compounds, we took the core sample and extracted all of the organic matter into a total lipid extract. And from that total lipid extract content of all of the organic matter, we processed it through column chromatography to just extract the aromatic fraction, which contains these compounds that you can see on the screen, as well as smaller compounds that have fewer rings. And with just that fraction of only the aromatics, we used a mass spectrometer to quantify them to see how much we saw in different samples taken from different depths relative to the boundary. And our findings show that the total pyrogenic pH, which is over here on the left, is increasing overall after the boundary relative to the background in the Cretaceous. And you can see that there are cycles of elevated pHs and lower pH, and we think this is likely indicative of periods of more intense fire relative to the background. And also, as you can tell from this figure, we have separated it out by the ring number. So with 6 rings over here in gray and 3 rings in blue, it becomes clear that the separation in terms of presence by ring number shifts toward larger ring pHs after the boundary. 3 in particular, which is coronine, benzo-GHI-parylene, and benzo-E-pyrene, which are also the 3 compounds that had their structures shown on the previous slide, are increasing with a very similar shape of the peaks to the total pyrogenic pH, which further emphasizes the point that these 3, which are larger, are more dominant in the signal than some of our smaller ring pHs, which would be indicative of colder burning temperatures. And over here in the right, we have something called a 6-to-3 ring ratio, which is a ratio of the total quantitative mass that we found of the 6-ring compounds, all summed and compared to the 3-ring compounds, which are smaller and would be formed in colder, relatively colder, because it's still a fire situation, than a 6-ring, which is formed during hotter combustion. And you can tell that compared to the Cretaceous background, the 6-to-3 ratio is elevated after the impact for quite some time, 100 to 200,000 years after the impact. Further work is needed to increase the resolution of this record to determine exactly how long this is elevated for, but this points toward the conclusion that fires after the impact were hotter. And because of the elevation of these three compounds here, shown here, we can conclude that forest fires were the dominant type of biomass burning during this time, because forest fires are the hottest burning biomass compared to other things like grassland or hydrocarbons. And these are acknowledgements, and I'd like to thank everyone that helped me with this project this year.
Yay, great job. Okay, Blaney, you have a question.
Yes, very nice presentation. Could you go back to the previous slide, please? Is there a spike right at the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary? Why is there that dark line on the first four columns of the diagram?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So that spike is within 1 to 2 centimeters of the boundary in the core. So it's unclear based on the work that we've done during this summer whether or not this is indicative of an event, a large fire event slightly before the impact, or there's possibly some smearing in the core that didn't allow us to properly place the boundary, since the gray shading is based on our age model and where we have found the boundary to be based on different types of dating analysis. So future work is needed to clarify what is causing that spike in total pH. Thanks for asking.
Okay, so that's before the canonical boundary then.
Yeah, but within 1 to 2 centimeters is a resolution of around 500 years, which is very tight. And at that point, it becomes a little less clear whether or not we're looking at an event or microtectonics or bioturbation in the core that would cause that shift. So future work is needed.
Thank you.
Bex has a question. Oh, actually, there's several questions in the chat, but I'll give Bex priority. Could this method be used to look for climate change impacts on fire severity?
That's the goal. Once we're able to expand the record, both in resolution and in time after the boundary, we should be able to make a broader assessment of how long it took the climate system to recover from the impact, which is a very significant climate perturbation, and possibly the most significant in the fossil record. And establishing climate system recovery to that kind of perturbation is essential.
Okay, Beth also has a question. She says, I've read that oxygen levels in the atmosphere have an impact on fire rates. Did you look at the atmospheric O2 during this time? Was it affected by the impact?
So O2, we didn't personally look at it for this time period, but it has been assessed through several different methods in other papers. And I will have to get back to you on whether or not that affected the fire severity here. I think some of the more prevalent research in that work is with the Great Oxygenation Event and the Ocean Anoxic Event, where that kind of work has been done, but I will look into it.